Hello, my name is Joseph Reyna. In this episode, I will be explaining what I believe was the original timeline for the apocalypse as it is mentioned in Revelation in the Bible. This is with the beast, with the Antichrist, everything that should have taken place but didn't because we jumped timelines. In that original timeline, Kennedy was not assassinated. His brother followed as becoming president. That was Bobby Kennedy. And after him was Martin Luther King. During this entire time, the Peace Corps had the funding of the military industrial complex. We're out there building schools and clinics, fixing roads. And that brought the entire world up in an incredible era of individuals thriving. And things were really going well up until an incident that happened in 1983, which ended up allowing the New World Order to take over. I'll be getting into that, but at the very beginning here, I want to give you some evidence for me explaining how we've jumped timelines. The timeline I'm from, in the attack of the 9/11 attacks, the Pentagon had a very small hole at the base. It wasn't very large, it looked like a missile hit it. Those engines should have been traveling over 500 miles an hour, the engines on each side of the plane, yet somehow they managed to not even damage the windows in the Pentagon. They should have broken those windows. At least that is some of the toughest metal in the world that goes into those aircraft parts. In this timeline, the entire outer wing of the Pentagon is destroyed with 184 dead. There were no deaths in my timeline because the area was being renovated when that plane hit. In this timeline, it's gone. You can walk from one side to the other. It's just a big open area. The entire roof collapsed, 184 dead. Now, buildings 1 and 2 were struck by aircraft and came down. Building 7, I remember watching it live. A reporter gets a fax. She stands there in front of the towers. She's reading it. She's from the BBC. She says, "Oh my God, Building 7 just collapsed." Building 7 is in the background behind her because they're in a hotel with double side glass doors, sliding glass doors, and you can see it's a really good view of the towers as they're burning. Now, Building 7 remains standing for an additional 20 minutes before it collapses. Those are the only 3 buildings that were destroyed on that day. In this timeline, Building 6 has a massive hole, it explodes, helicopter flies over. You can see 10 stories down into the building. All the buildings are on fire. They all burn to the ground in this timeline. That did not happen in my timeline. So when you go down to the memoriam, you'll see there are no buildings because they were all destroyed on that day, even though they weren't hit by aircraft. Now, when the tower was coming down, it came down way too fast. What you have in one of the images is the top tower, the part on top falling over to one side. It remains frozen because the building fell so fast, it fell at the speed of gravity. And what you see is this tower just remaining in that position as the building goes down to the bottom, to its destruction. That's not possible. It should have kept falling over. That building had all sorts of reinforced I-beams in it. It could not have collapsed. If you'd have dropped a bowling ball from that point, it would have followed the building all the way down. Another problem in this timeline that shifted, in my timeline, in the movie The Matrix 2, the Oracle was played by Mary Alice, the lady wearing white with her hair up in the air. In the very first movie, it was Gloria Foster, but she died. They were going to replace her in one of the movies, but it was going to be movie number 3. They have to move it up to movie number 2. I remember that distinctly because when I went from video, VHS, to DVD, I did not spend the extra money to get number 2. I got number 1 and I got number 3. I really liked those. But because Mary Alice had played the Oracle and I was really fond of Gloria Foster being the Oracle, I decided not to buy number 2. Now, Gloria Foster plays the Oracle in The Matrix, but she was dead in my timeline. So she was not the actress who played that. The Oracle with the white dress, she's protected by this Chinese individual, Oriental. He's wearing sunglasses and he's very good at martial arts and he's wearing a white jacket. So his white jacket matches her white dress. I remember that distinctly from the movie. I am friends with the author of The Matrix. She was very upset that they made the movie because they took the name Neo, they took Trinity, they took the entire story, which she had written, and made a movie out of it without asking her permission, without consulting her, without paying her a dime. And it took her 6 years to get the rights to it. Anyway, so when I asked her about the movie, she was so mad she didn't watch anymore after the first movie. So she couldn't confirm with what I was telling her. Also, in my timeline, the Jackson Five were 5 individuals, including Michael Jackson, not 5 individuals plus Michael Jackson. One of their brothers had drowned in my timeline, so they were only 5, like the Osmonds, 5. Also, the Village People, 5. You had the main singer, he was a policeman. You had a cowboy and an Indian, construction worker, and a biker. And now there's an additional one. This additional one was also in a short movie clip at the end of Up Periscope, which was kind of a comedy. At the very end, they sing the song In the Navy, and all 6 are in the video. When I first watched that movie, there were only 5 in the video. You could be saying, my memory's faulty, you're not sure what you remember because you really weren't paying attention to it. But I think you'll remember the Mike Tyson Holyfield fight, where Mike Tyson bit a small chunk of ear off of Holyfield, and he spit it down on the mat. This was on all the television stations. It's a miracle he didn't lose his boxer's license for that. But he did that. That was a shock. I really liked boxing only because my father had followed it so much. I really enjoyed watching Cassius Clay, which is Muhammad Ali, fight. And when he did that, it was like it was deliberate. And you just got, that's not professional boxing there. So he spits it down, looks at it, brings both hands forward, and looks back up at him. Now, I went back to look at it because that doesn't happen in this timeline. In this timeline, as he's coming out for that particular round, the referee stops him, makes him go back and put his mouthpiece on. Okay. Now, if you've got a mouthpiece on, it can be a lot harder to bite a chunk off. So he bites on the ear and he pulls on it, and then he bites on the other ear and pulls on it. So he tears it from the top off. That takes about 3 pounds to do that. I would love to have provided a photo of him spitting it on the ground. You can see the small piece on the mat there, but it doesn't exist in our timeline. It's not there. It never happened. So if you remember that, you have a very faulty memory, apparently. Either that or you're in a new timeline. And how do we get in this timeline? Apparently we just wake up in them. A lot of it is because of the work we're doing on ourselves, clearing old baggage, trying to remove the programs that were installed in us, downloaded, beaten into us. And as you do that, you start moving out of the timelines into much higher vibrating, I guess, higher frequency timelines. You're not in as low a frequency. That's the best way I can explain it. I really don't have any other explanation for it. But we have changed timelines so drastically that a lot of what they're trying to do doesn't get done. And by this I mean the deep state, the world cabal. They have a lot of plans and things set out that they've been trying to accomplish, but they can't seem to get them accomplished because the timelines keep changing on them. In the original timeline, Kennedy was not assassinated. Kennedy had plans for the Peace Corps. He was going to take the Peace Corps and use the money from the industrial military complex to build back better the entire world, to make America great greater than it was. And by this, I mean the infrastructure. So you've got the water from Flint, Michigan, that sort of situation. Get in there, get the money, redo the whole damn thing if you have to, make it right. And he did this across the entire nation, as well as the planet with the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps brought in schools, they brought in clinics, they fixed roads, they brought in fresh water, windmills, which didn't need power, and eventually electrical power. They taught the children English. Now you've got a massive one world system where everybody can speak the same language. Now, his brother was elected after him. This was Bobby Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. And he ended up continuing on with what his brother had done, making it so much better. Everything was thriving. And then Martin Luther King became president after him. So Martin Luther King's term, 8 years, would have ended in 1984. And before I get into what happened at that point, I'm going to cover some of the problems with the Kennedy assassination. I'll make it brief. There's a lot of information out there about it. Now, when Kennedy got shot, two other individuals also got shot. One was Governor Connolly. Governor Connolly was shot in the wrist. He's holding his Stetson hat when the car comes past the sign that kind of blocks the area. Kennedy starts grabbing at his shirt and pulling, and he's been shot at that point. So he's already shot. Connolly, sitting in front of him, is holding his Stetson hat with his hand. So the bullet that came out of President Kennedy flew around, spun around, and went back the other way and hit Connolly in the wrist. Apparently hadn't done that yet. So Connolly gets shot. And then there was another individual that got shot. He got hit in the face with a bullet that hit the underpass. He had been coming up and hit traffic because of the presidential parade. He wasn't expecting that. He got out of his car thinking it was an accident and got hit in the face when he heard a bullet strike. And they do have the evidence of the bullet striking the bridge itself, chipped off some cement, but a fragment of the bullet hit him in the cheek. So there were two individuals hurt there. Now, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, 5 other people were shot, in addition to Kennedy. This was very hard to find the information on it. I had seen a special by HBO called Bobby. In there, they document the individuals that were also shot. It is just not out there. I mean, it's out there, but it's not easy to find. If you go to Wikipedia, you scroll down, Kennedy assassination, Robert, you'll see injured 5 people were injured. It's like injured. They were shot. They weren't injured. Okay, they had bullet holes in them. And Sirhan didn't have that many bullets. He fired 3 at Kennedy. They wrestled the gun. He fired into the ceiling, and then he fired 2 more into the border of the door. From the drawings, I counted 5. 2 on this side, 2 on that side, and 1 up higher. And then Kennedy, that was not the bullets that killed Kennedy. It was the one from the back of the head, and it was 3 inches away. Sirhan did not get more than 2.5 feet from Kennedy, and he was in front of him. The bullet hole in the back of his head, which left powder burns, meaning the gun was about that far away from him, that was the shot that killed Robert. So you've got that going on. Then you got these other people that got shot. There was Paul Schrade. He got shot in the head. He bled so much they thought that he was already dead. Then there was William Weisel, and I believe he got shot in the stomach. The information in Wikipedia doesn't describe where he got shot, but there was one individual shot in the stomach. Elizabeth Evans, in the photograph, she's holding her head. She was grazed in the head with a bullet. And then you've got Ira Goldstein. He was hit in the hip. And Irwin Stroll, he was shot in the leg. He was 17 years old. So all these bullets, supposedly Sirhan shot them all. Okay? There's just, they went out of their way to get rid of these 2. And in doing so, shot themselves in the foot. By killing Kennedy, both of them, they had altered the timeline. The deep state was now taking over. Because in 1947, when they got that looking glass device from the ship, They could see events in the future, and they saw that there is a new world order. So to them, it's inevitable, and they're privileged and they are entitled. So what difference did it make if Kennedy was killed and Robert was killed and then Martin Luther King was killed, and they would just take over sooner and run the world that way? They've been trying to ever since, and it just hasn't worked. Now, some points I want to make about the Kennedy assassination on John F. Kennedy. The rifle that they pulled out of the building is a Mauser. Okay, they refer to it in some of the videos as an Australian Mauser, and some others as a German Mauser. The German Mauser looks like the Carcaja, but it has a sling on the side. The Carcaja sling is down here, as you can see in the picture where Oswald is holding it. The sling comes down this way, but it's on the side. The one displayed at the museum on the 6th floor is the German Mauser, not the rifle allegedly purchased by Oswald. That was a 36-inch Italian-made Carcaja rifle. This is a German Mauser, and the straps are on the side. You can tell it's sitting up there, and you can see that the straps don't hang from the bottom. They go up behind the rifle. Very clearly, that is a German Mauser. Also, the rifle is 36 inches long. Another thing you can do is grab a piece of string, fold it in two, place it on the length of the rifle, and then extend it on the photo of Oswald as he's standing like on a big TV screen. Put it at the heel because it's very clearly demonstrated where his heel is. He's got his toe pointed forward, but where his heel is at, and hold it, it will extend way above his head. Oswald was 5'9", should only extend about 3 inches above his head. That rifle is too long. So the one at the Smithsonian that they've got displayed there is a 42-inch Carcaja to make up for the difference of it being too long. Okay, but as you can see in the ad, he ordered a 36-inch Carcaja. Also, like I said, the straps are down here, and these straps are on the side. For 3 days in the news media, they were talking about this German Mauser that had been found. You can see it, the guy's holding on to the strap. You can see where the strap's attached to the side of the rifle. That is a German Mauser, and that's what they were looking for. After the third day, it changed to the Italian Carcaja, and they said Oswald had done it. Also, Oswald's chin in the picture, within 2 weeks of those photos coming out, Scotland Yard said these are forgeries, these are fakes. There's two pictures. One of them, the body's a little bit bigger than the other because it's taken up closer, but the size of the face does not change. And that was taken from his mugshot. It was placed over the chin. The guy who's there has a much wider, broader, flatter chin, and Oswald had sort of a pointed chin. And you can see the difference there in the picture. That is not Oswald holding that rifle. And that was a determination made by Scotland Yard, not me. Okay? I'm going to play a small clip of the Orville Nix video. Do not ask me where I got this. It's classified. He stated, Orville, that there was sound to his video. When the FBI took the video and gave him back his video, it was a copy of the video without sound. They lost the original. This video has sound to it, and you can hear a series of shots. Two of them so close together, it would be impossible to make that shot with a bolt-action rifle. Here we go. In the video, you can clearly hear the shots, and the witnesses all said, go back and look at it if you want, or don't, I don't care. Every single witness said they heard about 4 shots very close together, 2 of them almost on top of each other, all by the grassy knoll. Also, there's been a lot of commentators who speak of Oswald being a marksman. That's why he was able to shoot the president, because he was such a good shooter, a marksman. This is the badge for a marksman. It is affectionately referred to as a toilet seat. That's what our drill instructors called it. Nobody wants to have that badge. If you're better than that, your score is higher than that, then you become a sharpshooter. And the badge for that looks kind of like the German cross. The expert badge, that is for the highest shooters. And I was fifth award expert when I left the Marines after 4 years. I was also a primary marksmanship instructor, so I had second award pistol. Oswald was not that good a shot. He was at the barely qualifying level of being a shooter in the Marine Corps, which is still a good shooter, but nowhere near expert. In a letter dated 10 days before Kennedy was assassinated, he had ordered the CIA to hand over everything they had on UFOs to NASA. And NASA was supposed to get in touch with their counterparts in Russia so that the US could try a joint venture with Russia to the moon to foster peace. Can you imagine the world we could have grown up in? Also, Kennedy is quoted as saying, because of the CIA's actions when they were trying to do a false flag with people dressed as Cuban soldiers storming a beach in Florida and shooting civilians on the beach, he was very upset about it. He said he was going to destroy the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the wind. So the CIA knew they weren't going to be around long if Kennedy remained president. I'm not here trying to enlighten you to conspiracy theories. I'm actually pointing out factual events, things that took place. Like this here from William Casey, former CIA director. This is from a meeting in 1981 where he is quoted as saying, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Not knowing isn't what makes you ignorant. It's not wanting to know. Here's the problem in 1984 with Martin Luther King. There was an incident that happened with a Korean jetliner. 269 people were shot out of the sky. KLA, Flight 007, was off course and was flying over the Kamchatka Peninsula over a top-secret Soviet installation. The Soviets claimed they tried to contact the plane. They did not respond, so they were shot down. Here in the United States, they didn't say it was shot down. They said it was forced to land when they couldn't provide the individuals that were on board that plane. They found out it got shot. People were outraged at this. I mean, they were very upset. They weren't letting ships from Russia or ships that had Russian product like vodka offload. I remember that. Now, what's fascinating is in 1978, a similar plane was forced down by the Russians. It was over Murmansk. That airplane in a documentary was shown by the Russians to be equipped with special cameras underneath. It appears the CIA had installed cameras underneath that plane in 1978 that was forced to land. 2 people did die in that incident during the evacuation of the plane. Not sure how. But the plane was flying off course and was trying to photograph another secret installation, and they were forced to land. The second time, in 1983, September 1st, the Russians were tired of that crap. They shot it down. Okay. If there were cameras on board, I don't know, the plane got shot down and went in the ocean. But there were cameras underneath the fuselage of the first plane they brought down. So it's possible the CIA had asked them to fly off course. Now, it wasn't just a few miles. They were 200 miles off course when they were shot down. In this timeline, the original JFK timeline, the one with the apocalypse, within the same month, 25 days later, September 26th, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was the watch officer for Soviet surveillance bunker monitoring for nuclear launches. The alarms went off, and it wasn't one ICBM detected, it was 5 ICBMs detected. Now, there was a lot of tension because of what was going on and how upset the Americans were. So all the officers in there wanted to launch the nukes because of the preemptive strike from the United States. Petrov, seeing that there were only 5 ICBMs, suspected that it could be a malfunction because if the United States was launching a preemptive strike, he was launching a preemptive strike. He wouldn't just be launching 5 ICBMs, he'd be launching them all. So he went ahead and denied the launch. He was later reprimanded for that, okay, for not starting World War III. It did not go well for him, and it was kept classified. Once it was released, they actually made a movie about him, the man who saved the world. So we owe a lot to Lieutenant Colonel Petrov for that. However, in the timeline of Kennedy, that didn't happen. He wasn't there that day. He wasn't on duty, apparently. And there was a retaliatory strike by the Russians, which did a tremendous amount of damage. This allowed the New World Order to take over and eventually become a one world government. And if you want to know what happened after that, just read Revelation. But that's what happened in the original timeline. Now, with Kennedy executed in this timeline, our timeline, it jumped. And so we had a completely different situation take place. The next timeline jump, major timeline jump, was 2001 with 9/11. I've already gone into some of the details of that, where there was a small hole in the Pentagon. Now it's all completely destroyed. So it happened in several timelines. Anyway, we jumped timelines again because in my timeline there was a small hole, and in this timeline the entire outer sections. So we jumped several times out of there. Also, we've got elephants with breasts in this timeline. There's all kinds of animals that were not in. In 2001, at 9 a.m., Greenspan was going to make an announcement. That announcement was that the world funds were about to be released. You've all heard of GSARA and NESARA. With those world funds distributed, poverty would come to an end, and you would have people who have time to work on themselves spiritually to raise their own frequency. This would make them be able to be more accessible to the energies that would be striking the planet, or times when they would be meditating. You've heard of the Stargate, 777, 888, 999, 1111, and leading up to 2012, December. It's not so much that there were Stargates. I'm sure there were. The thing is that if you had that many humans who were feeling good about themselves and weren't in survival mode, and were all meditating for world peace and a better world and better health for everyone and prosperity, it would have made a massive change on the planet. That was hijacked, and I will go into that in this next video, exactly how they did that and the layout of that. Also, the understanding that we are going to get hit with a shockwave, and I will be covering that with something called the Cross of Hendaye and the research of Wiedner. Some amazing stuff. It pretty much lays it out. They put the evidence out, the information out there, the pieces, the clues for us to find, and Wiedner was able to break through those clues and discover what they were trying to say about this impact that's coming. So we would have been ready for 2012, and things might have gone completely different by 2013. However, 2013, Comet Ison would have devastated the planet. Comet Ison, with its electrical interference, would have ignited our atmosphere with all the aluminum they've been spraying. I don't care if you believe in chemtrails, or if there are chemtrails. The thing is, we have a tremendous amount of aluminum in our atmosphere, and it's powder form, and it's very flammable. With the atmosphere igniting, much like the one on Mars did when Comet Siding Spring went by, our atmosphere would have ignited. This is what was called the kill shot. There was a lot of research done by Major Ed Dames on it. The remote viewers saw it. It was going to happen, but it didn't happen. It did not happen because the fleet that I'm associated with or in contact with dismantled Comet Ison. They took it apart It was supposed to be 16 times brighter than the moon, the comet of the century, and they dismantled it. I'll go into more detail on that. So there was no destruction coming. And I remember distinctly before 2012, whenever I would ask somebody who I felt had more knowledge than I did, or more experience, or more spiritual, a master, I guess you could call them, they would always say, we've done this before, we're trying to get a different outcome. All this has happened before. It's interesting that after 2012, 2013, they weren't saying that. They were saying, wow, this has never happened before. That's what they kept saying. So we find ourselves in a timeline that has never existed before. And the outcome will be the result of the overall collective consciousness, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves. That's what's coming about. We are creating it. It has never existed before. It's just an amazing time to be alive. Also, I want to point out the damage that was sustained in Turkey earthquake, the 7.8. That was not a 7.8. If you remember that back in 2012, we were getting so many 6-pointers around the world, they modified the Richter scale. They took it down a notch. So now a 6-pointer would be called a 5-pointer. And they said, well, there couldn't have been that many 6-pointers before. It's just not normal because we have more equipment out there. But you really only need one Richter scale to measure all the 6-pointers on the planet. They are that powerful. So they took it down a notch. A 6-pointer would now be called a 5-pointer. A 7-pointer would now be called a 6-pointer. So if we go by that understanding, that was an 8.8. That's why there was so much damage. And people are like, this is a 7-pointer. How can there be so much damage? The same exact comments were made about the earthquake in Mexico City. Another 7-pointer shortly after they made the change. People were just flabbergasted by the damage of a 7-pointer. It's an 8-pointer. Okay? I could not find that anywhere on the internet. They have scrubbed that information, but I do remember they modified the scale in the same way that after Fukushima, they changed the radiation levels that were dangerous for humans. They moved them way up here, so now there's no reason to worry because the radiation levels are set up here now that you can take that much more radiation and you'll still be okay. I'm not sure if you will, but they definitely fudged on that. Thank you for listening this far. If you're still with me, the next video will focus on the continuing part of the timeline we find ourselves in, Comet Ison, how all that came about, and the prophecies that were decoded by Wiedner. He's got a book out called The Cross of Hendaye, and his research is just phenomenal. It's amazing how it's all tied back to the tarot card deck. It's laid out, card 16, card 17, card 18, card 19, and Judgment Day. It is so cool. I hope this information was helpful in trying to understand what's going on with the timelines. I may do one on the Mandela effect because it is so crazy, the changes that have been taking place. So many little things. I've had some personal Mandela effects myself. One of them was my sister. When 2016 came about and I was going to vote for Trump, she was very upset about that. She said, he's not a politician. I go, exactly. That's why I'm voting for him, because I'm tired of the politicians. She said he's gone bankrupt. I said, well, the United States is almost bankrupt, so that's a plus in my book. A year later, I confront her and I say, hey, what do you think of the work the president's doing? I mean, it's doing a pretty good job, I think, don't you? And she said, of course, I voted for him. I'm like, what did you do with my sisters? What I'm thinking. A friend of mine who does a lot of web design and a lot of the art for the company that I work for, he had a sister whose cat died, and the cat had 3 legs, and she was just distraught. So a month later, he decides he's going to visit her, try and cheer her up a bit, and the cat goes running by, the 3-legged cat. He asks her about it. She has no knowledge of the cat ever having died. So that was another Mandela effect. I have a friend of mine who I have been on an interview with. She's up in Canada, and up there you want to have a 4-wheel drive car because of the ice and snow. So she damaged the tire from debris in the road. And you can't just change one tire if they're too worn. You have to change all the tires. So she had to change all her tires. A couple of weeks later, she comes out of a store and she looks at her tires, and those are not the new tires on her car. So she checks them all. Sure enough, they're not new. She goes back to the station where she bought them at. The guy remembers her being there. He remembers selling her the tires, and he notices, yeah, these are not the new tires that are supposed to be on your car. So they go and check her credit card that was billed for that purchase, and it never happened. So that's another weird little Mandela effect. So these are just timelines that are changing, altering. And the higher you hold your frequency, I know it's difficult. I know the media has so much stuff out there trying to scare you to stop watching it, please. And try and look at stuff like Inspired. I know that's some stuff in there that might bother you. But do the best you can to hold your energy. If it's really bothering you, if it's really getting to you, just meditate. Just sit down. There's plenty of guided meditations on the internet. Matter of fact, I'll post one for you guys. Some of the ones I listen to that help me get myself out of a funk when I'm stuck and I'm just not feeling well. About 2 months ago, I was not wanting to do these videos. That's why there was a big lapse in time from when I posted the first 3, and I did not post after that. I'm like, there's a lot of intelligent people out there doing this. It's really stressful. It's a lot of work. Why should I put myself through that? They'll figure it out, right? And it was really bad. And I'm thinking, I enjoy this. I enjoy when I talk to someone and share this information. I love to answer their questions. And I learn as well from it. So I knew this wasn't normal. I'm not the only one who was feeling this. Maybe you guys were feeling it too. You are important. Everything you've done up to this point is important. I honestly believe that if not every single one of you have done the work you've done on yourself, have done the small acts of kindness every day towards others, we would not be experiencing what we're experiencing. You guys are that important. And I thank you for being on this journey with me.